talk about recession, what do we talk about, right? And I'm going to share my screen here so that I can show you some of this data and analytics. I'm hoping you guys can see my screen here. So one of the articles I wanted to bring up, right, about recession, what is it, right? Based on the National Bureau of Economic Research, recession is a period between a peak of economic activity and its subsequent troughs, right, or lowest point. And anything between the trough or the peak, we call it an expansion. So the expansion is the normal state of the economy, and that's where we should be, right? And then most of these recessions are brief. So what's happening today, right? We're in the 21st century, and we have seen quite a few recessions, right? We saw the dot-com bust from 2000 to 2001, which lasted about a year or so. Then we saw the big housing market, right, in 2008. And then we saw the most recent one in 2020, which we all know about, which was the pandemic or the COVID recession, which was one of the shortest recessions dated for the 21st century. And now we're kind of seeing another recession, right? And everyone is so afraid of what's going to happen. So the question is, are we currently in a real recession or no? And if so, how bad will it get, right? And what should we expect in the next few months, in the next year, a couple of years to come, right? Well, if we look and do a deep dive at the data, right, and this is from the, Bureau Economic website, and, the way a recession is defined is, having negative, one of the metrics they look at is having a negative GDP number, right? So, and when we talk about GDP, we're talking about the real gross domestic product, right? So if we look here at this chart, right, from 2018 all the way to Q1 2022, Q2 is coming up, and then there's an estimate about, the Q3 in 2022. So if we look at this, you will see here that we had a big dip, obviously during the pandemic here, right? It was a negative growth. And then kind of the economy came up, we kind of ran into this demand supply chain issues, right? And now in Q1, close Q1, we saw a decrease of 1.6, right? And they're expecting to have a Q2 decrease of 2.1%, as well as a Q3 decrease, right? But the question is this enough, right? To look and then kind of say that, hey, we are in a real recession? Well, if you look at the other measures, right, and we're talking here about the personal income, right? So if you look at the personal income, if we looked at the disposable income, if we look at the sales or the revenue numbers, the company, if you look at the industrial production, all of these have gone up, right? So are we in a real recession, or are we in a technical run, right? According to all of the metrics that we've seen, GDP with a negative growth, but also positive growth on personal income, corporate profits, and so on and so forth, I would say that we're not in a real recession yet. But anything can change, and anything will change drastically. And I truly do believe that we will not see a recession, a big one, this year, but definitely in 2023 and 2024 for sure. So that's kind of, a little bit of this numbers that we're looking at, right? And, the Federal Reserve is a big conversation right now, right? What are they going to do about this? And, as Jerome Powell, the Federal Reserve chairman, mentioned in June, he said, we should be able to control this, right? And how will we control this is by, increasing this interest rate, which we have seen a huge increase in the interest rate, right? And also, which this kind of brings us to the next step here, or topic, is the inflation, right? So there's got to be some price stability and control so that we don't see quite a big dip recession, coming up for the U.S. So David, What do you think about all these issues?
So I think there's a, very interesting case that you kind of laid out there with the recession. And the first thing, I was actually writing notes there when you were saying, David, what do you think about this? Because you triggered something in my mind. And for people that know Shark Bite Biz that have watched many of our episodes. We just had I believe it was last season, we had Evan Sohn. He is the CEO of Recruiter.com. He's also a CNBC analyst, and he ends up going on there every month when they do the jobs report. You know what I'm talking about? He comes on and he gives those job numbers. What's interesting to me is that Recruiter.com kind of defines themselves as a data company. They're scouring, the whole internet, finding out information, and they're bringing all this data into one place and basically using AI and BI and all those fancy acronyms to pull out some reasoning. And he was telling us on the show the great resignation, which I think ties into this, the great resignation will end by all his economic indicators by fall. Now, you've got to remember, this episode came out a couple months ago. And I think he was kind of spot on because that great resignation, it seems like it's kind of lining up nicely with, for lack of a better term,
right now,
with a potential recession, no?
Yes, I mean, absolutely 100% agreed right there.
I mean, I think you also did bring up a lot of good points about the recession. I do think it's hard. You look at the line of work that we do, okay? I don't know if you've seen this yet, but you probably have. When hard times come, budgets for tech and new systems and stuff like that is usually one of the first that kind of get squashed or minimized. They get canned right away. It's, the customers are coming, I guess, more conservative with cash flow and what they're spending money on. And don't get me wrong, that doesn't mean that customers aren't spending money. Customers being that we both work in the B2B sector, businesses are still spending money, but they're doing it as far as, I guess you could say, you piecemealing it. Like they're doing a little bit at a time instead of buying the whole pie and doing it all. Now they're doing, let's do a phased approach. Or, you know what? Do I really need 50 users now? We can probably only use 10 or 15 users for implementation. And then closer to go live, we're going to go add the other 35 or 40 users. And I think we're seeing a lot more of that just because a lot of businesses don't know what to expect. Have you seen that at all during, with your business yet?
Yes, absolutely, 100%. And I think, our business is it's a services company, right, and software company, and most of these deals go through online nowadays, right? You don't see people, and that makes it a little bit difficult. And also, the recession, right? Because we're talking about that. We've seen a lot of companies, even some of the big ones out there, where, like you said, they kind of restrict themselves. They want to test it out. They do a trial run, right? How is this going to run, right? Let's get a couple of users, which is the business users, the main business users, proof of concept, and the pilot, right? The proof of concept kind of dives into that pilot that they can use for a certain amount of time. And then you either get the green light to go ahead and, get it done because it does work. The pilot is working great, or you just get the red light and it shuts down. So, speaking about this recession, how it has affected also, my business, or kind of the same businesses in tech, is that people are becoming more stingy, right? In a way that they're saving their money and they're making more thoughtful decisions rather than just, kind of writing a check. Which what this means is that it's taking longer to close the deals. So this is longer sales cycles, and also
because
more resources.
The proof of concept is almost extending the sales cycle because you're implementing services, you're doing a project or whatever, but because you're in proof of concept mode, it's basically a paid sales engagement, and they're really holding a
Exactly.
stick and a carrot in front of you, and you have to perform every step of the way, and then also cross your fingers that the economy goes the way that you're looking for.
Exactly. And one of the metrics that I mentioned earlier was the sales increase, right?
Mhm.
Yes, we have a positive sales increase, right? But when you look at all of this, right? Yes, I did sign the deal, but it took me 6 to 12 months to sign the deal, or 6 to 18 months to
Mhm.
sign the deal. So if you kind of spread that out, it's kind of, hey, yes, it's going up, but it's taking longer and also more resources. So you kind of got that balancing effect here between, revenue and sales you're making versus the cost that it's taking you to do that and the time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, totally makes sense. And I think I'm going to take a little bit of a left turn here with my viewpoints on the recession itself. And I don't know how you'll feel about this, but this is what I think, and I'd love your feedback on it as well too. But I really view this recession or recession that's coming. It seems like most of the experts are saying right now that it is coming. It was trending on Twitter earlier today, for example. Uh, I view this as a manufactured recession. And if you didn't see, I put manufactured in quotes. And the reason that I put it in quotes is because, come on, look, if you close down the world's economy, okay, how is supply supposed to keep up with demand? Okay, there's a lot of people that want to go out and buy things, whether it's cars, but the cars don't have the features or they don't have the chips to make touchscreens inside the car. So, like with us, we didn't buy a car now. We ended up just buying our leased vehicle because our 2019 leased vehicle, when the lease ended, was still better than what we were able to find out there in the market. And I think
Exactly.
that the demand is there, but I mean, all those experts out there that work for our wonderful, wonderful government. I mean, this should have been predictable because, again, if you close everything down during the pandemic, all those manufacturing centers, not just in the United States, I mean, we're talking China, Asia, Europe,
This is
Africa,
a global. This is a global. Yeah.
global. It's a global thing. Now, if it was centered like, okay, just the United States is shutting down, just China shut it down, or just this country or that country, would we feel it globally? Yeah, but it would be probably more of a speed bump than a potential full blown recession.
Recession.
And I think that's where I kind of lie. Okay, I I don't know if once supply catches up to demand, will we be fully out of the recession? Is it going to end? Or if it takes a long time for supply to catch up with demand, are we going to go into full blown recession? And that's essentially what I really fear.
Yes. My thoughts on all of this is we are not in a real recession, right? We're in a technical one, like you said, or manufactured one, right? Will we hit one? Yes. Will it be really bad? I don't think so. Is there a lot of unknown? Absolutely, because you have to think outside of just the U.S., right, David?
Hmm.
This is a global, global, global issue, and there's a lot of topics out there and issues that are unresolved, right? That are not happening in the US. They're happening outside. And if you think about the goods, right, we're talking about
Right.
globally. This is a whole
Hmm.
market globally. It's not just the US. So yes, I
That's
definitely
one of
think we will
the
see a
bad things
recession.
about globalization, I think. Sorry. I think that's one of the bad things
Right,
about the globalization is because the world is, and I'm not against globalization. Don't take it to that extreme. What I'm just saying
right.
is because we're so dependent upon other countries for other things, and a lot of countries are dependent upon us for certain things, that once that's removed, I mean, you run into major issues.
That's stuff. I agree. I agree there with you, David, 100%.
So yeah, that's great. What do you think? You think
So,
you're ready to move on
David,
next topic?
yes. No, I want to, because I'm sure a lot of people are wondering here. We talked about the data, we talked about GDP, we talked about personal income, disposable, all of this, right? What are some of the four tips that people should kind of think about during this hard times, right, or expected hard times to come. What are your thoughts on that, David? And then we'll chip in and we'll make this a
So,
conversation.
yeah, definitely. So I have my own personal tips. I know you have some tips as well too. I mean, I'm kind of the person where if you can afford it, as far as the market stuff like that, when it's low, it eventually will bounce back up. So I think it's a good time. And remember, I'm not a financial advisor, so I've got to get that
Neither am I.
disclosure
Neither am
out there. But as far as crypto, as far as stock market, I mean, I do think the future is it will eventually rebound. How long is it? Have we seen the bottom yet? I don't know. I think that is really the piece to be determined. But I mean, I think it comes back to kind of like what we were talking about earlier. If you look in the B2B market, that people are being conservative as far as their purchases, their expenses, their headcounts. I mean, in May, I believe it was, we can, you should easily be able to fact check this, but in May, it was the biggest layoffs that the tech industry has ever had. They have more rescinded offers than ever before. And it's because they're being conservative, not knowing exactly. I mean, it's almost like when we first got into COVID, nobody knew what was going to go. Like, well, they were like, okay, flatten the curve 2 weeks. You do that. Then after that, it's still like, it's still murky out here. And that's really where businesses ended up getting conservative. And I think that there's a model there that people can follow. Okay, there's a model that people can follow that, okay, this is kind of what businesses are doing. And you should look at your home, almost like a business, P&L, the profit and loss, your budget, all those types of things, and manage it as stuff. And I feel that probably, being more conservative with your purchases, with your expenses, how you live your life now, and probably building a nest egg if you can, or make the necessary cutbacks, because again, we don't know if this is the bottom or if it's going to get much worse than here. So that's my biggest piece of advice. And if you have the luxury of having extra cash, I'd probably be investing it. I don't have that luxury, so we're on conserve mode. But what about you? I know that you had a really good bullet point list of a lot of ideas.
You were talking about cash reserves, right? Which is one of
Right.
my favorite topics. Not only just around this time, but also, for businesses who do the whole cash flow projection, right? And you mentioned layoffs as well. So when you talk about the layoffs, it's interesting because during COVID, when there were a lot of layoffs, people struggled, right? And one of the main reasons why they did was because they didn't have the cash available right away. So one of my tips that I want to, tell people out there is make sure your cash reserves are somehow there to be able to support yourself at least 2 to 4 months, depending on what all of your, bills are, expenses, and all of that stuff. Cash is king, as we say in Albania.
Cash
And
is
gold.
king. I love
Yes.
that.
So, I think that is a really good tip from my side. The other thing too is your budget evaluations, right? Try to get rid of your not necessary, not your non-essentials, right? All of the extra subscriptions that we sign up and we'll forget about it, and then it just kind of adds up on top of what you have. And I'm sure everyone has a lot of non-essentials there, so kind of do an audit of that, and kind of see where you guys are with that, right? And another tip that I also have is, which is very important, is be innovative, right? At G7, we're all about innovation, and be innovative with your sources of income. Diversify your sources of income, which means get some extra jobs, right? Now we all work remote. And it is so easy to put yourself out there and diversify this, source of income. And also, one of the most important things as well is consume the news very careful. And I always tell people, put your oxygen mask on, because a lot of this news that you watch every day, it's lots of panicking, some brainwashing, and just kind of pick and choose the right news to look at, and the right people to be surrounded with, right?
Are you trying to say that you cannot trust mainstream media? Is that what I'm hearing? I'm kidding.
Yeah, David, right. You just think you can't keep digging in there.
Yeah. I just bluntly say it, but no, I think your
Yes.
points are absolutely valid, and you know, I go through what I call droughts where I purposely ignore media and I won't go I just won't watch news or tech news I will, but outside of that, I don't listen or watch anything. I might do it for a week or two. Why? Because negative news gets to clicks, it gets to headlines,
Yes.
and it's like, why do you
Yes.
need all that negativity all the time? Take a step back and just kind of think for yourself.